Welcome to Conversations with Hannah. I am joined here today by my colleague in the House of Representatives, Kim Ferguson, who people will remember from 2 years ago. We sat here and did the same show in the same time frame of ending one session, legislative session, and starting another. But before we get into sort of our day jobs, today is the day of the Biden-Harris administration getting sworn in. And I know you were able to watch it live.
I was.
And it was pretty remarkable, you said.
It was. And I know you and I had a chance just very briefly to talk about it. And it just gives me chills. It was a great day and ceremony and, you know, very well done, low key, but the message was really clear about unity and moving forward. And I was really glad that I had a little bit of time that I could steal away just to watch it and feel like I was witnessing that historic moment. So it was really cool. So I hope later today you'll get to see the replay at least.
Yes, I know. I caught the tail end of it as people were going to get in their vehicles, the former presidents and first ladies. But I did get to catch a little bit just watching it through some of the shows and seeing clips about it. And one of the things that I saw that I mentioned to you was the poem that was read and the remarkable young woman who wrote it and read it, delivered it. And those words really resonated with me, sort of that yes, we've been through a difficult time, we're still in a difficult period of time, but we're also a hopeful nation and sort of the best is yet to come. And I thought that was the right tone to be setting for today.
And I agree. And I really think just as one person watching it, I felt hopeful and I felt that energy and turn the page, let's move forward. And we have had a lot of struggles, but I think with all of us kind of rowing and working in the same direction, hopefully we'll come out of this and really move forward and be better.
Years ago, Jim and I had the privilege of attending the President Bush 43, his second inauguration, and looking at the pictures today of the difference because of the pandemic and people not being able to be, just throngs of people on the mall and all that. It's, I think given what they had to work with for today, that really seemed to be pulled off really well too.
Yeah,
just a very different, ability to have an inaugural ceremony.
Yep.
But I think nonetheless, these days are such moments in our history to reflect on the strength of our democracy. And I think the promise of each new day that's coming. And I think that's everyone I've talked to and scrolling through Facebook. And I think everyone's sort of in that mindset of let's turn the corner and let's move on. And
together. We need to do it together. So, and it was a great day for women today, too. So I know we're going to talk about that later, but it was definitely a big day for women. So.
It absolutely was. And I think that, we will no longer be able to say that we have not had a woman vice president. And, that I think as being women who are both in elected office, but then just even knowing from talking to my girls and, it's tremendously meaningful. Regardless if it's not the same party you share or you aren't aligned on all the same policies, it is a momentous occasion in our nation's history to now have a woman vice president. And it speaks so much to young people. They won't grow up in a world where there wasn't ever yet a person in that office who was the same gender that they were. So
that's exciting.
It is. And then, thinking about the changes that have had to happen in our jobs since last March, not only in sort of the focus, which is almost all things COVID related for us, but also in the way in which we function in our jobs. Prior to the pandemic, we had always had to be in the House chamber to be taking votes. And when we knew that we wouldn't be allowed to do that, it took some time for leadership to come up with how would this work if we're not all physically in the same chamber. We had to get over some of the constitutionality of it, of what does it mean to have us assembled and be together if we can't actually be all in the same area. But they came up with some rules, and you've been really involved in that. And for our division, you're one of the 2 division monitors. So we have the 4 divisions with 40 people in each sitting in the House chamber, and you're one of the 2 division monitors for our area. So tell us a little bit about how we do have to interact in this way and what it's like to be taking votes from people over the phone.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're going to educate everyone again on how to mute their phones, because that's quite interesting on the phone line. So and thank you for that little summary. It has been a really challenging time, and I was honored to be chosen as one of 8 division monitors, as you said. And so basically what we have to do is when there's a formal session, and you've been there for coverage as well, when you cover formal session, I had to physically be present in the chamber with my roll call list. I have 21 members in my division,
Yep.
And I have a bipartisan division as well. So I have Democrats and Republicans on my line. And basically what happens is the folks at home watch the session happening, live on screen,
Yep.
and they're connected through me, through a phone line that they dial into with a password. And basically every roll call vote gets announced, and we discuss or we state what the roll call is, how leadership has voted, and then I have to call the roll of my division and record their vote. And then we go back and recheck that, and then I submit it to the clerk, and then the clerk records it in the actual voting machine.
Yes.
And then the tally is displayed. So we're averaging a good 10 to 15 minutes per vote on getting all of that done. And I know for you sitting at home sometimes it's very frustrating to have to wait because it just seems like you're on the line for hours and hours, and you are. It has worked for the most part, but it's certainly been a challenge, I think, for everyone involved. But we have to move forward, and we have to keep the wheels of government turning. So, we're doing the best we can with it, and I hope it's not going to be much longer that we have to do this. But
And, one of the things that we changed this year is usually in the second year of our legislative session, we end on July 31st. We're no longer in formal session after that. And so really all critical votes are taken, prior to that July 31st deadline. This year, because of several factors, one being we had not yet done our budget, because had we done our budget in the normal time frame, it would have really been a devastating budget to do because in the late spring, we really thought we would be down significant tax revenue dollars to be able to put towards the fiscal year 22 budget. And in reality, that didn't end up being as bad of an impact to tax revenue as we thought. But that was one of the reasons that we held off doing the budget, was to get some more data coming in and to really understand the pandemic itself, not knowing what was coming after July 31st and what our state might need to consider doing. Also wanted to keep us in legislative session for the chance that we had to go back and vote on something. And then we had 5 or 6 conference committees that were still doing work on July 31st, which also, had we not stayed in formal session, we wouldn't have probably been able to vote on those things coming back out.
right.
So this year was unique in that we stayed in session literally until technically we stay in session until midnight on the last day.
Right.
But the funny thing is, as you know, that if no one actually says it's midnight, it's not really midnight yet.
Nope.
So we were still in session at 4:30 a.m. Taking votes.
Right, on January 6th, that
Yes.
was the morning of our next swearing in.
Yes.
So we literally had a few hours to recover and get sworn in. So that was an unprecedented time for that chamber and the body, and they had never had that happen before, to my recollection. So
No, and while there have been a few times when we are in the chamber that we've looked over and seen colleagues asleep during what might be long sessions, never have we had to be on the phone before trying to wake colleagues at
Yes.
3 a.m. to have them take a vote.
Yes.
So, there are many times when I thought a Saturday Night Live skit was totally appropriate for the way in which we were
was.
having to do this. But the reality is it did work. And I think by and large, people have been pleased with the system. I mean, nothing is perfect right now, and we all have to make accommodations. But I think that, there has been a good willingness by all to try and make the best of the situation. And,
Absolutely.
as you said, I was in session that day and left the State House around 4:30, 4:05, went home, slept for an hour or two, showered, and then came back to get sworn in. Many folks were also at home still, so we had a few in the chamber, most of us at home. And that was, again, just a very different atmosphere. We're used to that being such a happy day, a day like today,
Right.
that's on the national level, but really, a sense of purpose and a sense of hope for the coming session. And we just did not have that sense of camaraderie this year or being together. So we functionally got sworn in.
It's kind of sad. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a happy occasion, as you say, but it was sad for us. I mean, I remember we were texting each other saying
Yeah.
congratulations.
Right.
I mean, normally it's such a day of ceremony and tradition and history, and
we're
so,
able to have
you know,
someone there with us
Right.
usually to
Right.
share in that. And this year I think the folks I felt probably the saddest for were our 17 new members
Mm-hmm.
in the House who didn't have the chance to have family members there to sort of witness their first time getting sworn in. They couldn't have any guests with them,
Right.
but they were allowed to be in the chamber, to at least have that sense of being able to be sworn in by the governor in person.
Right.
But even the trappings of getting sworn in, where you would, again, historically, the chambers would notify each other. They would send, delegates over to say, we've organized. We would send delegates to the governor and the lieutenant governor to let them know, which, when you think about it again, when that happens, sometimes people think it's silly, but it is a connection to the history of
Right.
how it's always happened.
Right.
You didn't have the phone to pick up and say, okay, we're all set, or send
Right.
a text or a tweet or a message to say, hey, we're all good here. You literally had people going to physically say, we're organized, we're set. And so you do have that sense of history and purpose when you're in there having those.
And you and I have actually been really excited. We've been on a few of those committees that have
Yes.
been dispatched. And when you get called, you're only one, of what, 12 maybe
Yeah.
or so, or 18 that get chosen. And we have great photos of us at past swearing-ins, celebrating and being part of that committee. And, again, all of that was missing. So our hope is we can move forward and get back in that chamber and get back to business in a more normal sense.
We also had
hopefully.
another big change that came at the end of
Yes.
December. That is not a usual change, hasn't happened in over a decade for us, and that we have a new speaker. So our longtime speaker, DeLeo, resigned at the very end of December to take a position at Northeastern, which was his alma mater, and had been rumored for a couple years that would happen
Right.
at some point. The new speaker, Speaker Mariano, is someone that you and I have worked closely with on a number of different issues. And have found to be someone who's always willing to listen, and I think a good has a really good pulse on the chamber as a whole, which I think is
Absolutely.
important in the speaker. And so that is something that we will see how that plays out going into this session. The first thing that we have to do is to have a rules debate, and that will probably happen in a couple weeks or so.
That's what we're hearing,
Yes.
right? It's all rumor at this point, but yes, probably in the next couple of weeks.
And that really sets the tone for, again, how we conduct ourselves in the chamber. What are the norms? What are the ways in which we can expect time to look at bills, ahead of time? And there's always the constant debate about, some people want us to have more time, others don't. And so we'll see that play out in the next couple of weeks. And then after that, hopefully we'll begin to get committee assignments. And
Yep.
our bill filing deadline, which is usually very quickly after we get sworn in, has been extended by a month,
Yeah.
really in recognition of two things, I think. One, just the pandemic and the fact that there's still so much going on. And two, because we were in session up until the last moment, we didn't really have the fall, which we traditionally have, to be working on bills and to doing a lot of that analysis and meetings and conversations with people about what we want to file in this session. So it gives us a little bit of a breathing room to do some of that work now too.
Right. And again, to your point with our new colleagues coming in, the 17 of them, I do feel for them, again, with bill filing. They have had, not a lot of exposure to even coming into the State
Right.
House, to getting some training. I mean, we all had the benefit, and I know you came in a special election,
Yep.
so we were trying to catch you up at the beginning as well, but you were very well prepared. But they, it was almost unfair and a little cruel to expect them to turn around and file bills within 7 days
Right.
when they don't even, have the adequate training yet on how to file the bills.
Right.
So they can have wonderful ideas, but this is going to give them a little bit of time to get their feet wet and get organized and deal with all the day-to-day COVID and unemployment issues that we're dealing with, and then move forward that way. So, and that will also, to your point, push out our committee hearings a little bit, because even if we're assigned to our committees now, there are no bills yet for us to hear.
Right.
So that deadline, pushes everything back in mid-February. So who knows when our first hearings will be, but probably sometime in March,
Yeah, I would think so.
think. So, so we'll see how that goes. But
The The other thing that'll be different, I think, too, for new people coming in is traditionally all the new reps and their aides are in what's called the bullpen. They're all in one large hearing room together in the beginning before they get assigned to their office space. And I think, in the past, the strong benefit of that is, you get to know a group of people that you're coming in with really well. But you also do share that, hey, I just figured out how to do this.
Right.
Hey, I just figured out how to do that.
Right.
Because there is so much new. And again, to your point, these colleagues are all sitting at home on their laptops. They don't have their aides with them who are in another spot. And you're trying to get up to speed. And even for those of us who have been there for a number of years now, I'm in my 4th session, you're in your 6th session. There's still a lot that is even new because of the way that we have to conduct business at the moment, not being in the State House and with our staff.
And people maybe at home don't realize, that building is still closed.
Right.
State House is closed because of issues, obviously, between security and COVID. We are instructed, do not have your staffs in there. They don't want the offices, bustling with staff because of COVID. So again, it does put them at such a disadvantage that you don't have that support system that, to your point, you can lean over and just say, okay, I just figured that out and I'm going to share it with you. So, I do feel for them in the isolation part. And I know that you've been part of Zoom meetings that I've been on where we're trying to help them and trying to just give little pointers or just reach out and say, don't hesitate to ask because, again, they need the help and support now more than ever. So.
And I think, moving ahead, and you alluded to it earlier, the volume of constituent work. It's always an under-recognized part of this role, and it is really an enormous part of this role. And it has become even more so, I think, since last March.
Absolutely.
Everything from just pure questions about the pandemic as a whole or trying to understand things, and then many, many specific things around unemployment issues. That's been a huge piece of all of our time. And especially we each have a woman who works with us. And those staff members, that is a majority of the work that they do day in and day out is to work with constituents on issues. A lot of people, now that we're in the period of actually having vaccines, enormous numbers of questions around the vaccines, everything from, how come my group isn't in phase 1 to, I'm nervous about the vaccine. Can you help me get some more information on it? To, when does my phase start and how do you know we're going to have enough? So, and again, every person that reaches out to you, sometimes they reach out to us early. A lot of times they reach out to us after they've already tried to do a lot themselves, especially in unemployment things. They've tried to follow the channels that are advertised as ways to get help. And so by the time they come to us, they're very frustrated. They're really at wit's end. And so, I have found that people are incredibly grateful to have the assistance. But, I try and remind myself every day, what would I be doing right now if I was in their shoe? How would I be feeling?
Right.
And
it's frustrating. Right.
It's
and
very
scary.
Yes.
So.
And the flip side of it is, I think, on the state level, we had something like 50 people in the unemployment area dealing with, general issues that people would be having around unemployment pre-pandemic. And they scaled that up to almost 1,300 people within the course of like a month and a half.
Right.
Who were also all remote.
Right.
This wasn't a group of people sitting together. And so these people who had never worked on unemployment issues are trying to get up to speed, trying to deal with technology issues, and then also trying to help people. So I think when we end up looking back on this in some period of time and someone really assesses all that had to be done, I think it will be easier for people to reflect on how difficult it was. But in the moment, all you really care about is, getting an answer to your issue. And that is an enormous amount of time that we spend doing that.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I do think too that, first of all, I can't believe it's going to be almost a year.
I know.
I literally cannot believe that, we're at that point. But it seems like too, we keep going over these hurdles, right? Like first it was, oh my gosh, are we going to go into lockdown? Like what's going to happen? Are we going to close the state? What's going to happen with my school? What's going to happen with the businesses, the restaurant industry? So, we were dealing with that. And then it was, oh my goodness, in the early spring, we started to see the first deaths and the ICU admissions. And, we started up that that peak that way. And then it was, what are we going to do about the schools? Now the kids are out of school permanently,
Yep.
and we don't know when they're going back. And then it was the mask order and things about wearing masks and people keeping safe and
the reopening
unemployment.
plan.
And then the reopening plan. That was
Yep.
so huge that
Yep.
people wanted to see where they fell in that phase. And then it became the vaccination plan, right? So we hear that there's going to be a rollout, and, we had that to deal with, as well as, unfortunately, peaks again that we were headed back into, and more concern as the winter progressed. So it seems like we just keep coming over these hurdles and thinking like, okay, I want to take a breath. We need to take a breath. And unfortunately, we're right into this another new territory, right? Or
Right.
another new problem that who would have thought we would have ever had to deal with. So, I think we just keep trudging forward, and we appreciate too, a lot of our constituents, and I know we've talked about it, are going through some really difficult times, and we're trying to be there to help them the best we can. And sometimes we don't have the best answer either, and we
Right.
can't fix it. And so,
And that's always a
we're trying to
problem
do it.
for people that want to,
We're fixers.
the nature
so-
is wanting
yeah.
to fix it for
Yeah.
people. And again, I have found that people have been really grateful for even the opportunity to be heard
Mm-hmm.
on what the issue is, and trying to chase down answers for people. But it also, I think, is, the staff, again, who are, sitting at home by themselves, who are also working on these issues. I
Right.
mean, it's been a long road. I know the woman who works for me, she takes it personally. It's like you carry these people's,
Sure.
what's happening to them and the struggles they're having. Like you take it to bed every night thinking,
Yep.
what can I do tomorrow to try and help this person and get an answer? And so, I think our staff is used to dealing with people that have issues, but the volume, I think is pretty crushing. And especially,
Absolutely.
our staff are by and large younger. These are sometimes their first job out of college or a second job. And so I think, part of our role too is to also help make sure that they're feeling like they can handle that sense of responsibility that they have at this moment right now. So, and I know they've all done a great job, and we're all really grateful for the work that they put in. But, at the end of the day, this is a huge part of our role. And I think people are probably more aware of the value of the constituent work
Absolutely.
than they were in the past for it. But we mentioned earlier the fact that we did this 2 years ago, and I was looking back at the notes that we had done for 2 years ago, and sort of I was talking about how at the time we were 2 of 7 Republican women in the State House.
Yeah.
At the time, there were no women in the Senate. On the Republican side, there are still no women in the Senate. But now we're only 2 of 5 Republican women in the House. And, that is something that is sometimes presents opportunities and for us, in the sense that I know you feel the same way I do, that, there's a lot of great opportunity to be involved in many different things out there, but there's also this sense of responsibility to be involved in things and to really show up as a Republican woman. And sometimes I think people have a preconceived notion about what being a Republican woman is.
Absolutely.
And so, I thank God that I have you as a partner, that we
here.
can do a lot of these things together. But one of the areas that you and I have spent a lot of time working on, especially in the last couple of months, is on the Women's Caucus of Legislators. And,
Yes.
there's this year more women than ever. We're over 30% now of women in the legislature. Still not representative of the number of women overall in the Commonwealth at just above 50%, but growing. And the Caucus of Women Legislators, we work on really 2 priority areas. One, as you know, is really making sure that there are issues out there that impact women, especially around economic and equality issues, and that those are things that we're giving voice to as women legislators, but also on giving voice to women in government in all levels, whether they're a staff person or an elected member, and also making sure that we are supporting them, whether that's through professional development or leadership opportunities, mentoring. And so the last couple of months, we've been focused on the transition between one legislative session and the next, and thinking about what should our strategic priorities be for this coming session, which is not a conversation that we've had as a group in the past. We've tended to dive right down into legislative priorities and really trying to step back and think as women, really where do we see ourselves having an opportunity to lend our voices and to raise awareness around certain issues. So it's been great to work on that together, and I think we're really well prepped to go into this legislative session a little bit more organized perhaps than we have been in the past.
Absolutely, and a huge amount of credit goes to you though on that work, and I know you want to talk about the great things we've done together, but I have to point out to everyone at home that you did yeoman's work in pulling our group together and kind of thinking more strategically and saying, okay, guys, like, what are we going to do here? Like, let's talk about our mission. Let's talk about really how are we becoming more present, if you will, and more just available to do, like we were talking about, social media things or interviews, and creating a list of those of us that are willing to be interviewed for, on bills or on current events, or, even today we were saying before the show, about reporters reaching out to us saying, wow, what did you think about the inauguration today as a woman and as a woman in politics? And I think we need to do more of that. And, that's what does encourage a new generation or the next generation of women to run for office and get involved. And we've done other things like with You Will, with UMass, and also with women in government on a national front. So I think that work absolutely has to continue, and now it's like a real prime time to focus on that. So
absolutely, and
hopefully we can.
I think the strength of the Women's Caucus is that it's bicameral, meaning it's both the House and the Senate women, and it's bipartisan. And, that has really been the hallmark of this Women's Caucus and something that is important to all of us. So when we come up with priorities, it's really through those lenses. Is this something that both chambers, see as a priority, and do both parties see as a priority? And I think that that's a unique way of looking at the world. And part of what has really gotten me excited is the fact that that is a differentiator right now. And it's also what the world needs to see.
Exactly.
So, let's raise the fact that we do look at the world this way, that we work together in this way. And I think, to your earlier point, sometimes, it's easy to be blind to it. And we haven't done a very good job as a Women's Caucus about sort of elevating that this is the way that we conduct ourselves very successfully. We might have policy differences, but we're able to talk about them and we find common ground. And so I think this session, given where we are in the world, I think it's really time for us to increase the level of awareness that people have around the Women's Caucus. And somehow we have like a minute left. And
wow.
We're still at like number 2 on the
again.
list.
It's okay.
But, I'm excited for the new session. I think there's a lot of opportunity present. It really is sort of a new day at both the national level and then for us in the House chamber with a new speaker. Lots to look forward to. And, I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. I think that's the only path that we can be on. But I think at this moment in time, I'm especially hopeful about where we're at.
Me too. And congratulations on your reelection.
Yes, you too.
Another 2 years. So it's all good.
Thank you for joining me here today.
Absolutely.
And
pleasure.
Hopefully it won't be another 2 years before we do this again.
No.
But thank you to everyone at home. I am thrilled to be serving as state representative again for 2 years for Shrewsbury and Westboro. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you.